Okay, part three. Hoping this sort of splitting up the video isn't too painful for everybody, but it just gives me a chance to think about what I'm going through next. So thank you for humouring me. Okay, so part three, we were just going to configure essentially what we wanted to set up as the details of our mint. So as we work through this edit zone here on the scripts, it asks for the media path. I'm going to leave that as is, because that's basically going to look in the current directory that we've got the scripts in. It's going to look for an images folder, and then any specific NFT resources are going to be in there. So I'm going to use this test PNG one. Ask for your creator name. So for me, I put my Affirmation NFT in there. If I don't totally misspell, there we go. Affirmation, and I'll give myself a capital as well. Why not? It's a name, right? And then you could put a collection name here. So I'm just going to call this test collection. There's a whole probably discussion sort of worthwhile of what, how you conceive what you term as a collection and that type of thing. I won't get into that here. I'll just keep going. If I've created a collection through this script already and I want to add NFTs to it, I could put the existing ID in here, and that will simply expand the existing collection by whichever NFTs we then mint as we go through the process. It's a nice way of being able to mint all of the NFTs for perhaps a particular series, all under the same token ID. It will make things like trading your tokens on Zeus Market, for example, it's just launched, a lot more simple if it's all under the same token ID. Otherwise, we're all juggling lots of different IDs, which there's going to be a certain amount of for legacy NFTs anyway, I believe, unless we reissue them or something similar. There's then a concept of maximum supply of NFTs in the collection. I've simply set that as 10,000. I've not really put too much thought into that at this point, but I'll just leave it at that number. Perhaps we can sort of discuss that as we move forward. I put this concept of supply in here as well. So, for example, for some of the NFTs that I create in my Series 1, I might have 30 copies of certain designs. So say I just want to come in here and I want to create 30 copies or multiple copies of a certain NFT for sale. Then I can come in here and I can set this. Let's just set this to 10, so I'm not sat here waiting for it to churn through loads for you. And that will basically loop through and create 10 of each NFT that I define down here. So then in here is where we have the basic metadata for the NFTs that we're going to create. So I've simply opted to follow along with the current consensus that is being sort of developed by May over at Hashpack, that I'll put a link to, but this is the sort of schema that it sort of has been put forward and is going to be proposed as part of a HIP. So we will just follow this along. I've kept with this for things like name, creator, description, image type, but obviously there are other things that you can feed into this too in terms of arbitrary JSON objects as additional properties if you want to put traits in there and things like that too, or perhaps put the actual collection name within the properties on the NFT as well itself, so it's just in there as part of the metadata too. That could be handy. So keep that in mind, but as it stands for the out of the box example I've got right now, I've just got the 4 properties that we're dealing with: name, description, image, and type. I've got the common stuff up here, the creator name, that will just be injected into everyone anyway. So I've just tried to capture the stuff that will be different between NFTs potentially here. So I'm going to just change this to sort of say a test token name and a test description to verify that, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter, but that's normally what you would see as the actual name in Hashpack, for example, and that would be the description underneath it. This then refers to the image that's in the images directory or the media path, and this is then the MIME type for that particular image. So again, a whole lot of discussion around this and reference point probably I can link off to for you to have a look at different MIME types so you can understand what needs to go in there. But just know that that references the type of file that this is, so that applications can understand what it is they're going to do with that file when they sort of go to display it. I've kept just a commented out section to sort of provide a bit of description down there below for you too. Now, if you wanted to get into setting up custom fees, think royalties, then I've provisioned for that here as well, and I've provided a structure for that. I won't do it as part of this first example, but in essence, you could simply uncomment one of these sections, put in a royalty amount, think as a percentage, a fallback fee, and an account ID for that royalty to be paid to. And that will then be applied to the NFT as it's being minted. I've tested that, that all works fine. It works for up to 10 maximum, which is as per the spec in the SDK. That's pretty much the end of setting up the information for your NFTs. It's then going through and actually following through the minting process for it. So I'm just going to save that file. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the terminal as part of this sort of piece of software. So I'm just going to go through to View and Terminal and just bring this up a little bit. Now we're going to want to go through and just execute some commands in here to actually get it to run this code. Before I do that, we have some certain dependencies that I've got in place for this code to work and run. You can see that based around some of the stuff that's imported at the top here. We actually need to make sure that those are available locally. So those are defined in the package.json here. You can see things like the actual SDK itself, the .env extension for working with the environment file, the NFT storage dependency as well for working with their API too. And then just of note as well, out of the box, I've left this start parameter here as set to running node and mint.js, which is the file that we're sort of going to be working through as part of this. Just going to check what time I'm up to onto this. I'm on to 7 minutes. I think it's probably worth me carrying on going at this point rather than splitting. So this will be a slightly long one. So just bear with me on that. But what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to, in this terminal down the bottom, I'm just going to do npm and then install. And this is then basically going to add in all the dependencies that I've set up in the package JSON so the code will run. That will just sit there, it will go through. It's added those packages in to the modules area. If I refresh this, you'll see it adds in node modules and it's got all of the stuff in there that's actually installed. So this will actually be able to run, okay? Then the next thing that we need to do to actually execute this script is then simply to do npm and start. So if I go npm, or if I can type properly, npm and start. And when I do that, that is going to execute this parameter here, this sort of setup. It's going to execute node with the script that we're currently on for Mint.js. So if you wanted to have a play around with the account key reset, for example, you could come in here, change that to account key reset, save it, and then when you do the npm start, it's going to execute that instead. Yeah, so that's just another way of you being able to play around with the different files that I'll put forward in here. It's not ideal, don't get me wrong, you know, but it's something for you to be able to execute the different scripts in a fairly standardized way. I think I've got everything right at this point that I need to set up to show you before we execute. So I'm just going to hit start and see what happens and see if it's if I've missed anything in the mix here. So let's go. Okay, so error creating collection type, error cannot read functional unit of undefined collection ID is not present, blah, 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 blah. So I've missed something in terms of installing something here. I'm just going to pause the video so I don't drag you through my debugging and then I'll come back. So bear with me for a second. Okay, I'm back. I think what I'd got going on was that I had an old version of the SDK version in the package file here. So I'll update that on the repo when I'm done with this video. But I've just updated that to 2.6 here. I've just run the npm install command again, and it's just updated the packages. So I'm hopeful now that when I execute this again, and when we come into here, we should see that the error disappears and we can carry on with the minting process. So I'm just going to give that another whirl, hit npm start, and we should start to see this chugging along. So okay, it's created the token with the ID. This is the ID of our parent collection. We didn't customize any fees in this, so we've not got any of that. It's showing us the IPFS URL for the metadata that we've created for that NFT. And now it's bouncing through the creation of each of those copies that I put in as 10. And it should sort of draw to a close there. Takes a second just to finalize that last one, and then it should be all done. That, in essence, is us having then minted that particular token. We could go on to the Hashpack wallet for this particular treasury account that we've set up, and we could see that mint in the wallet itself. We could go on to Dragonglass and query that token ID and see essentially all of the transactions. That might be a really nice, quick way of me showing you that something has happened in the background. Okay, so I'll just go app.dragonglass. Let's go here. That's my account. And I'm going to go to testnet here. And I'm going to paste in the token ID. And then come here. This is a test collection that I gave the name of. If you remember back in the code, we just called it test collection. There we go. Over here, so up on the testnet, it's come in. This is the ID that it spat out, saying this is a collection that's been created. View the token details. We can come in here. Then if we go into all transactions, we'll see that there's 11 that have been created there. I'll just show all of them. The first one is where we've actually created the token, and then we've got 10 transactions for each of those copies that we've minted underneath that main token that we created. So obviously the more supply you have, the more transactions that will be undertaken to mint each of those. So just bear that in mind in terms of when you run this on the mainnet. These are the type of costs that you can expect to be paying when you actually mint your tokens. I think off the top of my head, when I did my design 6, I did obviously one parent collection being created and then 30 supply. And I think that worked out as roughly around 11 HBAR, if my memory serves me right, for you to be able to go through and mint that sort of quantity on there. So I'm going to pause there for that part. That was quite a long video, so apologies for that, but that's kind of got you to the point where you can see we're minting stuff. I will now do a second video in a second that will just show that with royalties applied, and then I'll get the Hashpack wallet open as well, and you can see that obviously the token appearing in there and looking at how that sort of looks within the wallet with the royalties on there and things like that too. Okay, bear with me. Part 4 coming up.